A friendly desert community where the sun is hot, the moon is beautiful, and mysterious lights pass overhead as we all pretend to sleep. Welcome to Night Vale. Also, sorry about that, Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner. I just had to steal that intro. Hey, you guys! And welcome back to My Favorite Things. This time we dive into a very strange yet wonderfully interesting thing. And what is this thing? Well, I've actually brought it up several times before. Welcome to Night Vale. Welcome to Night Vale is a podcast, which you can find on iTunes or anything else that gives out podcasts. I really don't know. I don't keep track of what gives out podcasts. Who does that? But it's played off as a radio show. It's written by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner and stars Cecil Baldwin as Cecil Palmer, host of Welcome to Night Vale Community Radio. And as I have just said, this podcast is played off as a community radio show. And as I did just say, this podcast is played off as a community radio show for the small little town in the desert known as Night Vale. However, all in Night Vale isn't as it seems. Strange things happen almost 24/7, or 7/24, however the government always manages days. Or it could be either way, since time doesn't really exist. Like, strange things happen in Night Vale almost all of the time. A few examples: a glow cloud that comes into town and rains dead animals onto the citizens, and then later becomes the head of the PTA board of Night Vale School District. A pack of three-headed dogs run around town doing political graffiti. There's a civilization living under Lane 5 of the Desert Flower Bowling Alley and Arcade Fun Complex. And there is a woman from Italy who turns around and looks back, and the woman from Italy sheds no tears,
for you shall face your greatest fears.
Basically, all manner of horrors and conspiracy theories all exist in Night Vale. Like, everywhere else, yeah, probably not true. In Night Vale, no, they're 100% true, and everyone just deals with it. However, the citizens of Night Vale really aren't, affected by it. As a matter of fact, they treat it as if it's, a mundane, everyday thing. Speaking of which, I love the characters of Welcome to Night Vale, because they're all so creative, and it doesn't feel like they need to be, limited to where they're originally from. For example, Hiram McDaniels, which, may I remind all of you, is literally a 5-headed dragon. Who cares? Or the faceless old woman who secretly lives in your home. Actually, I think she might be in there right now, notating all of your books on your bookshelves. Is she? I'd go check. Maybe you won't remember what was originally on there in the first place. And Carlos. Sweet, wonderful, beautiful, perfect Carlos. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about the relationship in Welcome to Night Vale. In Welcome to Night Vale, the radio host, Cecil Palmer, actually talks about Carlos in the first episode, and it's in that episode we actually find out, as far as we know, that Cecil is actually homosexual. And I think this is a wonderful innovation for media. I mean, very few things actually have a character that's actually homosexual, and he's the main character, or at least that's how it's kind of played off. Heck, from the first episode, in Cecil's own words, I fell in love instantly. Also, the build-up to some of the things that they're making big deals out of is just amazing. For example, when we find out the truth about the civilization living under Lane 5 of the Desert Flower Bowling Alley and Fun Complex. However, no build-up, to me at least, is gonna compare to the build-up with Desert Bluffs. Because throughout the whole thing, we were told, Desert Bluffs, you are so lame, so lame, you do not even belong in this desert. You always try to show us up at sporting events. You always have better uniform. You know, screw you, Desert Bluffs. But let me just put it to you this way. If you're listening to Welcome to Night Vale or planning on listening to it, when you get to the episode where we are entirely in Desert Bluffs, oh, are you in for a surprise? A very, very, very surprising surprise. But how come I love this simple podcast? Like, something I can't even see, but it's something that I just really like. And here's the reason why I've kind of figured I really like this podcast. I kind of had this thought while walking along a dark street in the middle of the night, looking up at the sky and seeing all of the stars out. God, that sounded a lot less pretentious in my head. But as I looked up, I was kind of thinking that Night Vale describes life a lot. I mean, sure, some of its subtle horror comes from Cecil pointing out some of the very obvious things in life. Like pointing out that eventually everything will end and nobody will be left to remember the universe. That perhaps life might not have meaning to it. And that one day we're all going to, you know, die. That's it. Game over, man. Game over! However, why I like this podcast is because most of the time, Cecil doesn't try to be intimidated by any of this. And the thing is that I really like how Cecil just looks at all of the weirdness going on around him and he just goes, yeah, that's life. And it always seems to underline saying, yeah, it's weird, but hey, it's pretty nice. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this installment of My Favorite Things. And I will see